I never thought it would happen. Never thought we could fall for the same person. But here we are. Two sisters. One love. And the line between us has blurred beyond recognition. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I always thought love was something pure. Something sacred. But sometimes, love isn't something you can control. And sometimes, love destroys everything. At first, it felt innocent, like a fairy tale. How could it not? We were sisters, identical in every way, except the one thing that truly mattered. And then he came along. A smile, a laugh, a touch. But it wasn't the way he looked at us. It was the way he looked at me. Or was it her? I still remember that moment like it was yesterday. When it all started to slip away. When we both realized what we felt for him. The quiet conversations we had when no one was listening, the subtle glances we shared. But it wasn't enough. There was something darker underneath, a pull neither of us could explain. Until one night, I found out something about him. Something no one should ever have to know about the person they love. Something that would change everything. Did he feel the same way about me? Or was it her all along? But the worst part? It didn't even matter anymore. Because what we found out wasn't just about love. It was about betrayal. The betrayal that would destroy us. And now, I wonder if we were ever really sisters at all. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop asking myself. Was it worth it? Keep watching, because the truth is darker than you think. And this is just the beginning. The first time I noticed it, it was almost too subtle to believe. We were standing in the kitchen, both of us sorting through the mess of pots and plates after dinner, but the air between us was thick with something unspoken. The way she looked at me when I turned around, it wasn't a typical look. It was something else, something I hadn't seen in her eyes before. The way she studied me, like I wasn't her twin anymore, but a stranger. I should have asked her what was going on. I should have demanded an answer, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence hang there, because deep down, I knew. I knew what was happening. It started innocently enough, with laughter. With jokes shared in passing, with small conversations about the things we both loved about him. At first, it was harmless. We were sisters, we thought. Sisters who could talk about everything, even him. We even joked about how alike we were, how lucky he was to have two of us to choose from. But with every laugh, with every glance we shared, something changed. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something more profound, more dangerous. It was desire. I saw the way her eyes would follow him when he was around. And I saw the way she'd glance at me when he said something that made her laugh. It was as though the subtle tug-of-war between us wasn't just about his attention, it was about something deeper, something neither of us was ready to face. She started spending more time with him. More than I was. I could tell she was pulling away from me, but I didn't want to confront it. I was too afraid to acknowledge the unspoken shift. It was like we were both trying to stake a claim, and every time I saw them together, I felt a pang of something cold creeping into my chest. But still, I didn't act. I told myself that it was normal, that this was just how things went. She was my twin. She understood me more than anyone. She wouldn't do anything to hurt me, right? But deep down, I could feel it. The tension was growing. The moments we spent together, just the two of us, were fewer and farther between. She became more distant, more absorbed in him. I could see it in the way she looked at me, as if to say, I know what you're feeling, and I know you can't stop me. It wasn't just the little things anymore, it was the big things. The way she smiled when he called her name. The way she would linger just a little too long in his presence. And then came the day that everything changed. We were at his place, the three of us. It was supposed to be a casual afternoon, nothing special. But as we sat on the couch, the distance between her and I became impossible to ignore. Every time I spoke, she seemed distracted, her gaze fixed on him, as though she were hanging on to every word he said. and then, at one point, I caught them. Just for a second, their hands brushed against each other. It wasn't an accident. I knew it wasn't. My breath caught in my throat. I froze, not knowing what to do. The room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. I looked at her, but she didn't look back. Her eyes were locked on him, her face soft with that familiar expression she always wore when he was around. I could feel my heart sink. The reality of what was happening began to hit me, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. That night, as I lay in bed, the thoughts swirled in my mind. I didn't know who I was anymore. The bond one had with her, the one that had always felt unbreakable, was now slipping through my fingers. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The jealousy, the hurt, the confusion, it all mixed together in a way that I couldn't process. I tried to talk to her. I tried to ask her what was going on. But every time, she would deflect. She would change the subject, laugh it off, tell me I was overthinking things. But I wasn't overthinking. I knew. I felt it. The way she would get defensive when I asked, the way she would withdraw from me more and more. The guilt gnawed at me. She was my twin. My flesh and blood. I should have been happy for her, right? I should have wanted her to be happy. But all I felt was this bitter, gnawing sense of ownership. I didn't want to admit it, but I wanted him for myself. The next time we were all together, I watched them. I watched the way he looked at her, the way he smiled at her when she said something funny. I watched the way she lit up when he spoke. And I felt something break inside of me. I wasn't ready to admit it, but it was clear. It wasn't just admiration. They were something more. And I was the outsider. It felt like the world was closing in on me. The air felt thicker, the silence between us louder. The realization that we were both in love with him hit me with a force that left me breathless. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream at her and tell her she was being selfish, that she was breaking something sacred. But all I could do was watch. And pretend everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the end. And neither of us was ready for what was to come. This was just the start. The first crack came quietly. It wasn't some dramatic confession or a heated confrontation. No, it was much more subtle than that. It came in the form of a question. A simple, seemingly innocent question that shook the foundation of everything. Do you think he likes me? Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as though she was afraid of hearing the answer. I froze. The question hung in the air, suffocating me. We were sitting on the couch together, the space between us smaller than ever. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for some kind of reassurance. But all I could think about was the truth I wasn't ready to face. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that he didn't feel that way about her, that I was the one he cared for, that I was the one who had a right to him. But I couldn't. Because that would be a lie. Instead, I just stared at her. The weight of the question hung heavy between us. What could I say? How could I answer when my heart was torn in two? I don't know, was all I could manage. My voice felt foreign, like I wasn't even the one speaking. It was as if my words were trying to distance me from the truth. But it didn't work. The truth was still there, burning like a fire I couldn't put out. She didn't say anything after that. She just nodded, a slow, almost defeated gesture, and turned her gaze away. But in that moment, I saw it. The tiniest flicker of something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite put into words. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was shame. Or maybe it was something darker, something more dangerous than either of us was willing to admit. I watched her walk away, her footsteps quiet, echoing in my mind long after she was gone. And for the first time, I realized just how far gone we both were. But it wasn't just that question. It was everything. The way she smiled at him when he spoke to her, the way she laughed a little too loudly when he joked. It was all there, in front of me, and yet I refused to see it. I refused to admit that I was watching my own sister fall in love with the same person I loved. As time passed, things only got worse. The tension between us grew, thickening with every stolen glance and every moment we shared with him. We tried to act like everything was normal, like we were still the same two girls who had shared everything. But we weren't. Not anymore. We couldn't be. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid. That this was just a phase. That it would all blow over and everything would go back to the way it used to be. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The lies were getting harder to tell. The lies I told her, the lies I told myself, they were starting to break down. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I was falling apart inside. It was at a party, just a few days later, that everything came to a head. The three of us were there, standing together, laughing, as if we were a normal group of friends. But I wasn't laughing. I wasn't enjoying the moment. I was watching them. Watching him and her, side by side, too close for comfort. He touched her arm, just lightly, but it was enough. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. It was a small thing, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me, it was a clear sign. A signal I couldn't ignore any longer. I excused myself from the group, needing to get some air. I stepped outside, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind a mess of confusion and jealousy. I didn't know what I was feeling anymore. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into a pit of despair that I could never crawl out of. I didn't know how long I stood there, alone in the darkness, before I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting it to be him, but instead, it was her. She was looking at me, her face unreadable. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what she was thinking. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't know if I was ready for this conversation. But I couldn't back out now. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving mine. I think I'm in love with him," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an admission. It was a statement. My stomach dropped. The words she said hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She didn't wait for me to respond. "And I think you're in love with him too," she continued, her eyes searching my face for any sign of denial. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that I didn't feel what she thought I felt. But I couldn't. She was right. I had been lying to myself for too long. I had been trying to push away the truth, but there it was, staring me in the face. But what could we do? What was left to say? The silence stretched on, and in that moment, I realized that we were both trapped. Trapped by our feelings, by our guilt, and by the love we both shared for the same man. How had it come to this? How had we let ourselves fall into this mess? And the worst part? We were both too afraid to do anything about it. Too afraid to admit the truth, because we knew that once we did, nothing would ever be the same again. But the truth was already out there. And neither of us could undo what had been done. The question was no longer whether we could fix things. It was whether we could survive the truth. The truth had been hanging over us like a storm, dark and heavy, ready to break. And when it finally did, it wasn't some grand revelation or dramatic argument. It wasn't even a fight between us. It was quieter than that. It was the silence, the space between us, that spoke louder than any words ever could. I hadn't seen her for days. She was avoiding me, and I didn't blame her. The tension had become unbearable. We hadn't talked, hadn't even looked at each other the same way. And yet, in the back of my mind, I was still hoping that somehow things would go back to normal, even though I knew they never would. But then he called me. I hadn't heard from him in days either. He sounded distant, as though something was weighing on him too. I had tried not to think about him, not to dwell on what was happening between the three of us. But it was impossible to ignore him. Impossible to forget the way he looked at me, the way his touch still lingered in my mind. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low, hesitant. I agreed to meet him, not knowing what to expect. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't going to be easy. When I arrived at the park where we agreed to meet, I saw him standing there, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He was looking down at the ground, lost in thought. I approached him cautiously, unsure of what to say, unsure of what this conversation would mean for all of us. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked up, his eyes tired, almost haunted. "Hey," he replied, giving me a small, weary smile. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. There was so much I wanted to say, so much that I had kept bottled up inside. But I didn't know where to begin. "I don't know how to say this," he started, his voice thick with uncertainty. "But I think I need to explain something to you." I felt my chest tighten. The air between us felt thick, suffocating, as if every word we were about to exchange would change everything. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around nervously. "It's about her. About your sister." My heart skipped a beat. What was he going to say? I could feel the pit in my stomach deepen, that familiar feeling of dread creeping in. She told me something the other night," he continued, his words coming out in a rush. "She told me that she loved me." I blinked, feeling the world tilt around me. "She said that?" I whispered, my throat tight. He nodded, his expression pained. "Yeah. And I think I'm falling for her too." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he had just said. A part of me wanted to scream, to shout at him for doing this, for letting it happen. But another part of me, the part that had been buried under all the guilt and the jealousy, knew that this wasn't his fault. This wasn't something he had planned. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said, looking up at me with desperation in his eyes. "I care about both of you, but I can't keep pretending I don't have feelings for her." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My mind was reeling, the truth unraveling faster than I could catch up. This wasn't just about him and me anymore. It wasn't just about my feelings. It was about everything. About the lie we'd been living, the betrayal we'd both ignored, the reality we hadn't wanted to face. "You have to choose," I said, my voice trembling. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to force him into a decision. But I knew it had to be said. This wasn't something we could keep going on pretending wasn't happening. He looked at me, his face full of anguish. "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to lose you, but I can't lie to myself anymore. I can't deny what I feel." There it was. The truth, spoken aloud. And in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for so long. He was right. We were all trapped in this web of our own making. We had all ignored the consequences, the fallout. But now, the consequences were here. And they were inevitable. "I think you already know who I'll choose," he said softly. His words were almost a whisper, but they cut through me like a knife. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what to say. My sister, the person I had shared everything with, the person who had been my closest confidant, was now the one I was competing against. And what did it mean for us now? What did it mean for our relationship, for everything we had built? I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. I guess we both know where this is going." He nodded, his face stricken with guilt. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt either of you." "But you did," I whispered. And I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. We stood there in silence, the weight of everything we had just said hanging over us. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to do. The truth had already changed everything, and there was no going back. As I walked away from him, I felt something cold settle in my chest. I had known for so long that this would happen. That one day, we would have to face the reality of what we had been doing, what we had been feeling. but knowing it and living it were two different things. I could hear his voice in my mind, the words echoing over and over again. I can't lie to myself anymore. And I knew, without a doubt, that neither of us would ever be the same again. I thought the hardest part would be the confrontation. The words. The confession. The decision. But no, the hardest part came after. The aftermath. The silence that stretched between us like an unspoken agreement, one we were too afraid to address. I had always believed that when the truth was exposed, it would set us free. But the truth, it seemed, only left us in chains. It was the morning after the park, and I couldn't get out of bed. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of the world outside my window. Birds chirped, cars passed by, but in my mind, everything was muted, as if the noise of the world couldn't reach me. I had expected some sort of clarity after the conversation with him. I thought the decision would bring me peace. But instead, it only left me drowning in uncertainty. I could still hear his voice. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt either of you. But the words felt like a betrayal now. I didn't know who he was anymore. I didn't know if I ever truly knew him. I didn't know how to face her, my twin, the person who shared my every moment, my every secret. There were moments when I almost wished I hadn't found out. But I knew deep down, that was a lie. I would never be able to live with the lies, with the nagging feeling that something was wrong. That we were living in a world built on false promises. The door to my room creaked open, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Her presence filled the space before she even spoke. I need to talk to you. Her voice was the same, yet it felt so different. There was no warmth in it anymore. No comfort. Only coldness, and something else. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't tell. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She sat down beside me, the space between us vast and unbearable. I could feel the weight of her stare, but I didn't meet her eyes. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see. We can't keep doing this, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly, though it wasn't from emotion. It was from something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. I know things are messed up. I know I've hurt you. But I can't pretend anymore. I wanted to scream, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much we had hurt each other. But all I could do was lie there, too tired to fight. The fight had already been lost. We were already past the point of no return. I never meant for this to happen, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I didn't plan any of it. But you saw it. You felt it too. You know it wasn't just me. And there it was. The truth, again. But this time, it wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about her either. It was about us. The connection we had, the bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. And yet, somehow, it had been shattered, irreparably. The thing we had always shared, our unspoken understanding of each other, was now tainted. Torn apart by love, by jealousy, by our own selfishness. I wanted him, she said, her voice small, almost ashamed. And I thought you didn't care anymore. I thought I could have him. I didn't know what it would do to us. I didn't know how far I would go. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound of her voice. The guilt in her words only made the pain worse. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. I wasn't sure if I even wanted her back. We had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But then she said something I wasn't expecting. He told me something, too, she whispered. Something I didn't want to hear. He said that he was falling for me. And that's why he pulled away from you. That's why he couldn't choose. Because he couldn't hurt you. The words hit me like a physical blow. My heart clenched in my chest, a mix of anger and heartbreak flooding my system. So it was true. He had chosen her. But not in the way I had hoped. Not in the way I had wanted. I sat up suddenly, the motion sharp and quick. My breath was shallow, my hands shaking as I reached for the edge of the bed for support. I knew, I said, my voice hoarse. I knew you two were something. I didn't want to hurt you, she said again, almost pleading. But it was too late for apologies. The damage had already been done. The trust, the connection, everything we had shared, it was gone. Irrevocably destroyed. I don't want your apologies, I said, standing up now, my legs unsteady. I don't want to hear that you didn't mean for this to happen. It doesn't change anything. I walked past her, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get away. I needed to be alone, to figure out how I was going to live in this new world we had created. She didn't follow me. She didn't try to stop me. The silence between us was louder than anything she could say. And it was clear, in that moment, that we were both already lost. Lost to him, lost to each other. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, barely recognizing the person staring back. The girl in the mirror wasn't the same one who had once shared everything with her sister. That girl had been consumed by jealousy, by the desire to hold on to something she couldn't control. And now, all that was left was the shattered remnants of what had been. The love, the betrayal, the lies, they were all tangled together, creating a mess that I didn't know how to untangle. The truth had come crashing down, and with it, everything I had ever known. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't undo it. And as I stood there, staring at the girl in the mirror, I realized one painful truth. Some things are broken beyond repair. And this was one of them. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that the story we had been living had ended. And what came after would be something neither of us could have ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of nothingness. The world outside seemed to keep turning, but it felt like I was standing still, trapped in a fog of pain and confusion. I didn't know how to navigate the silence that had settled between my sister and me, nor the space that now lay between me and him. It was as if we had all been caught in a storm, and now, after the winds had passed, we were left to pick up the broken pieces of something that had once seemed so beautiful. She avoided me even more. She disappeared into her room for days, only emerging when she needed something, food, maybe, or the bare minimum of interaction. I didn't blame her. I was doing the same. But the emptiness between us felt so suffocating that it was impossible to ignore. I couldn't even look at her without feeling the weight of everything that had happened. We had both crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And then came the message. It was from him. At first, I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to hear from him again. But I was curious, in spite of myself. Maybe I wanted closure, maybe I wanted answers. But whatever it was, I couldn't ignore it. "Can we talk?" the message said. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Talk? What was there left to talk about? What could he possibly have to say to me after everything that had happened? I should have deleted it. I should have blocked him and moved on. But something in me, something deep and desperate, urged me to respond. I agreed to meet him. The place was a small cafe near the outskirts of town, one we used to visit together when things were simpler. The thought of it made my stomach churn, but I pushed through, forcing myself to walk in. When I saw him sitting by the window, his back turned, I almost turned around and left. But I didn't. I sat down across from him, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, the silence stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. "I never wanted it to end like this," he said finally, his voice low. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear." His eyes were sincere, but it didn't matter anymore. I looked at him, feeling the anger and sadness bubbling up in my chest. "You think you didn't hurt me? You think I'm just supposed to forgive you?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "You and her, all this time, I thought we were something different. I thought we had something that was unbreakable." I couldn't stop the bitterness from seeping into my voice. But I guess I was wrong. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to fall for either of you, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. But the truth is, I did. I did fall for both of you. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do. His words were a confession, but they didn't make me feel better. They didn't make the situation any less painful. They didn't erase the feelings of betrayal that still cut through me every time I thought about it. You can't fix it, I whispered, the truth finally hitting me. It's too late for that. The realization hit me harder than I thought it would. There was no going back. We had all crossed a line, and there was no way to undo the damage. The pain, the guilt, the confusion, it was all there, a tangled mess we couldn't untangle. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. We couldn't go back to the way things were. We couldn't erase what had happened. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I wish I could change it, but I can't. I closed my eyes, the tears threatening to spill over, but I refused to let them. I had cried enough. I had allowed myself to feel the hurt and the loss, but now, in this moment, I couldn't afford to let it consume me. Don't apologize, I said, my voice steady, even though everything inside me was crumbling. We all made choices. And now we have to live with them. He didn't say anything after that. He just sat there, looking at me with those sad eyes. And for a moment, I thought I might forgive him. I thought I might be able to let it all go. But the more I sat there, the more I realized I couldn't. We couldn't. The damage had been done, and nothing could erase the truth. Not the apologies, not the regret, not even the love we had once shared. I think we should go our separate ways, I said quietly, the weight of the decision finally settling in. He nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting that. I understand, he said, his voice heavy with finality. I'll never forget you. I hope you know that. I nodded, standing up to leave. Goodbye, I whispered, and I walked out the door, leaving him behind. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand confrontation. No shouting. No final words. Just an acknowledgement of the truth that we had all known for a long time. The truth that we could never undo what had happened. I walked out into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in days. It wasn't relief, not exactly, but it was something close. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure, we couldn't stay in the past. We couldn't keep dragging this out. And so, I left him behind. And I left her behind too. I don't know where she is now. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. But I do know that sometimes, the hardest thing to do isn't forgiving, it's letting go. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only way forward. Weeks passed in a blur, each day feeling more like the last. I moved through life like I was on autopilot, going through the motions but never truly living. The silence between my sister and I was deafening. We passed each other in the hallways, exchanged a few awkward words here and there, but nothing more. It was as if we were both stuck in the same place, too afraid to move forward, yet unable to turn back. I tried to avoid thinking about him, about what had happened, about everything that had shattered between us. But it wasn't easy. The memories, the moments, they haunted me. The way he smiled at me, the way his touch had once felt like home. I had tried to convince myself that it wasn't worth it, that I was better off without him, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. But even more than the memories of him, it was the guilt that gnawed at me. The guilt over my sister. The guilt over what we had both done. We had crossed a line we couldn't uncross, and no amount of apologies could fix it. I began to pull away from everyone. Friends, family, it didn't matter. I couldn't look anyone in the eye without feeling like a fraud. How could I explain what had happened between us? How could I explain the mess we had made? I didn't even understand it myself. Then, one evening, I received a message. It was from her. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like everything was fine and that we could just move on. But the other part of me, the part that still cared, knew that I couldn't keep avoiding this forever. I agreed to meet her, though I wasn't sure what to expect. We met at the same cafe we used to frequent, the one that held so many memories for both of us. The place where we had once laughed and shared everything. But now, it felt different, strange, almost suffocating. She was already sitting at a table when I arrived, her face downcast, her eyes tired. When she looked up and saw me standing there, I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, as if unsure where to start. "I don't know what to say," she began finally, her voice low and filled with regret. "I've been thinking about everything, about how it all went down. And I can't help but feel like I ruined everything." I sat down across from her, not knowing what to say in response. I had so many emotions bubbling up inside me, anger, sadness, confusion, but I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "I never meant for it to get this far," she said, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I didn't want to hurt you. But I think I was just too selfish. I didn't think about how much it would affect you, how much it would affect us." Her words were like a bomb, but they didn't heal the wound. The truth was, I was still angry. Angry at her for choosing him over me, for not thinking about what it would do to our relationship. But the more I listened to her, the more I realized that we were both victims in this. We had both made choices, selfish choices, and now we were both paying the price. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were before, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. And that I regret everything. I didn't want it to end like this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her, my sister. The one I had once shared everything with. The one I had laughed with, cried with, and grown up beside. And for a moment, the anger melted away. The hurt was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming. "I don't know if we can ever go back," I said quietly, my voice hoarse. "I don't know if we can fix this. But I'm not sure I want to. The damage has been done. And the truth is, I don't think I'll ever look at you the same way again." Her face fell at my words, but I wasn't angry anymore. It was just the truth. And sometimes, the truth hurts, no matter how much you try to avoid it. "We've lost something," I continued, my heart heavy. "Something we can't get back. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe we weren't meant to stay the way we were. Maybe this was the universe's way of showing us that we're both capable of being more than what we were." She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what she was feeling, but I knew what I was feeling. I was tired. Tired of the games, tired of the guilt, tired of pretending that everything was okay. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same again," I said softly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we need to move on from this. Maybe we need to let go of what we were so we can figure out who we're supposed to be." She nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. I hope you can forgive me someday." "I already have," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I truly had. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. Sometimes, forgiveness is just letting go. We sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything hanging between us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning, maybe not a new one, but a different one. "I think I need to go," I said, standing up. "But I'm glad we talked." She nodded again, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Me too." And with that, I walked away. I didn't know what the future held for us, for me, for anyone. But I knew that this chapter was over. It was time for both of us to start a new one, separate from the past, separate from him, and separate from the mistakes we had made. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. I stood at the threshold, watching the door close softly behind me. A sense of finality settled in my chest, but there was no relief, no closure. Just the raw ache of knowing that everything we had shared, was gone. My sister and I, once inseparable, now stood at the edge of something unfamiliar. But in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the pain of losing something had to happen so that something new could emerge. We can never truly erase the past, but we can learn from it. And in that painful lesson, there's a kind of strength we didn't know we had. Life doesn't give us second chances to go back and fix what's broken, but it does give us the chance to rebuild, to start again, from the wreckage. I took a deep breath and walked away, the weight of the world on my shoulders but a flicker of hope in my heart. The future wasn't clear, and the road ahead was uncertain. But I knew that whatever came next, I was ready to face it. This story may have ended, but the journey is never really over. There are always more twists, more turns, more lessons waiting just beyond the horizon. And who knows, maybe, someday, we'll learn to heal. Maybe, someday, we'll find a way to mend the things we've broken. But for now, all we can do is move forward. Thank you for watching and for taking this journey with me. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think happened to the characters after this? What topics do you want to see explored next? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. There's a lot more coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time.